took Andy's car, drove around his hometown, went back to his house, maybe saw a friend, saw his family, went to sleep in his bed that night, got some phone calls, sent some texts, went shopping. Andy's still lying in a field. Purchased some things so that nobody would find out what he had done to Andy. Cleaned up Andy's car, because that's whose car it was, Andy's. Hid Andy's car, covered it up, concealed it, just like he thought he had concealed Andy, and that Andy would not tell what had happened to him because the defendant had silenced him. Fortunately for Andy's family, who were spending those days missing, scared, hurt, maybe worst of all, hopeful, people were able to find out what happened through the hard work of the Raleigh Police Department, law enforcement officers in Virginia, Andy's family, Andy's friends, the city of Raleigh, everyone looking, hoping, trying to do what they could do to find Andy and find Andy's car, praying that Andy would be alive when they found that car. Sadly, that wasn't to be. But where the defendant thought that he had silenced Andy, fortunately for his family, that's not what had happened. Because Andy, through his phone and through his friends, were able to speak out and say, "This is who I was with. This is who you need to be looking at. This is where you need to look." So through the hard work of, as I said, the police department and his family and friends, Raleigh police did just that. They looked. They looked at his phone. They found text messages between him and the defendant. Those text messages about buying that car that they find yards behind the defendant's house, concealed, with blood, with holes in it, with bullet still inside the car. They search the defendant's house. They find inside the house a pair of pants with the defendant's driver's license, social security card, other identifying information. They pull out of that, curiously, a yellow bag. They start looking in the bag. They find in the bag a bloody rag, several spent shell casings. They continue to search the house. They look under the couch where they believe the defendant was sleeping. They look in the cushion. They find the gun hidden under the couch. A gun the defendant was not lawfully able to possess, because the defendant was a convicted felon and is a convicted felon. Mind you, this happens the next day after Andy goes missing. September the 12th, Andy goes to Cameron Village, pursuant to what law enforcement would find out from his friends, that he's going to sell his Land Rover. He's meeting up with this guy who he had met earlier in the week to look at the car. Andy's hopeful. He thinks, man, I've got a guy that I'm going to be able to sell this car to. I'm going to be able to get rid of this car, move on, maybe sell another car, because what you'll hear is that's kind of what Andy did. one of his things is that he liked to flip cars. Unfortunately for Andy, he decided to flip it with the wrong person. He took some steps, you'll hear. What you'll hear is he took steps to go to a public place, to use a different number through Google. You can do a voiceover app that changes your number so that you can communicate with somebody, but they don't have a good way of identifying who you are. Just to have an extra layer of safety when you're talking to somebody that you don't know, that may be driving from another state to meet you. He goes to a public place, the Village District, Cameron Village, the K&W cafeteria. Now, I think it's important for you to remember what the time frame is that we're dealing with here. This is September the 12th of 2020, the heart of the pandemic. Okay? People are still working from home. People are not going out. So it's less crowded out and about during that time period, right? The defendant, who had come down earlier, and you'll see this through text messages, to meet with the victim, says, I'm going to come back and we'll do this deal for the car on the weekend, but I want to bring my mechanic. The defendant, when he comes back, doesn't bring his mechanic. He brings his brother-in-law with him. The defendant leaves, goes away with the victim, Andy. Brother-in-law stays at Cameron Village with his daughter. 30, 40 minutes later, defendant pulls up right in front of the car. We're good, let's go. Okay. They follow him back to Virginia. Then the brother-in-law gets a curious text message from the defendant that says, hey, go ahead and take my car back to my mama's house. I got to make a stop first. Now, what they'll tell you is that nobody saw Andy in that car when they came back. Okay? Andy's in the car when he leaves. He's not seen in the car when he comes back. But what you'll also hear is that he didn't get out of the car and look for him, right? He's sitting in the passenger seat. The guy pulls up, let's go, drives away. When they find that car in Virginia, as I told you, there's bullet holes in the car. There's still a bullet in the car. And there's blood all in the front seat that has been tried to have been cleaned up. They find the cleaning supplies in the car. They find receipts for the cleaning supplies that were purchased the day of or the day after this car deal was supposed to go down. They talk to the defendant. He acts like he doesn't know anything about it. Andy's still not found. Family, sadly, at that point, still has hope, right? But maybe that hope is waning. They begin to look further. We've got to find Andy. We need to find him to know exactly what happened. Through law enforcement methods, they're able to look into some phones. They're able to get phone records and data from cell towers that can give you distances and where the phones were used. They get the defendant's phone records. They start plotting those phone records. Where were they used? Where do we think maybe this body is? Because at this point, law enforcement, let's be real, they're pretty sure Andy's not coming home. Okay? They start looking, searching, hoping, finding, eventually, Andy. Where do they find Andy? They find Andy in Virginia, shot in the back several times, at least 5. They take him to the medical examiner. They even get bullets out of Andy. They searched that car that was Andy's that was found at the defendant's house. They find more shell casings in there. They take all those shell casings, they take them to the lab. They say, we need to match these if we can and see if this gun that we found, maybe this is the gun that was used. Sure enough, shell casings found in the defendant's pocket in Andy's car match the shell casings of the gun found under the defendant's couch. When they start looking around this scene where Andy is, this field out in the waist-high grass or so off of a rural road in Virginia. They begin to question, well, what's the significance of this scene? Well, they determine, well, it's an area that the defendant used to live not far from. Familiar with that area. Then they start looking further, like, well, what happened? How did he get out here in this field? Well, they found him because they've got these cell phone towers and they're just out walking around, searching, hoping. Well, they notice Andy out there. Andy again calling out from this grass, saying, "Find me." Okay? They find him. And in that grass, there's a little path that kind of wanders back around. And they find Andy laying there, wearing the same clothes he was found or seen leaving in. His feet together, his hands above his head, his body decomposing, doesn't look like Andy anymore. They begin to say, okay, well, let's see if we can figure something out. They see the gunshot wounds in Andy, consistent with what they believe may have happened in the car. They find just up the path from him his raincoat that he had been wearing, with bullet holes in the back of it, with burn marks, so you could see how close he was when he got shot in his back, unarmed. That's what the evidence in this case will be. That the defendant took Andy Banks's car after he chose to shoot him at least 5 times in the back and then dump his body in a field to conceal him so that he would never be found, all while the defendant drove around in his car, told no one about this, didn't breathe a word of it, after killing Andy with a gun he wasn't supposed to have, depriving his family of their child and their friend. At the end of this, I'm going to ask you to convict the defendant of first-degree murder, robbery, firearm by a felon, and larceny of that motor vehicle. Thank you.
Jury's put to the bench.
Justin Merritt had everything to lose and nothing to gain from driving down to Raleigh, North Carolina to rob a man of his car and kill him. In the year 2020, Justin was a welder. He was working for A&A Mechanical, which is a company that contracts out people for industrial maintenance. We're talking contracting someone out to a large factory to repair and maintain those huge pieces of equipment. That was his job. He had a 13-year-old son and twin 18-month-old boys. He lived in Danville, Virginia. At the time, he was staying with his mom, but he had 50-50 custody of his 18-month-olds. In the year 2020, Justin got into a car accident. He was T-boned by a woman who was texting and driving. She flew through a stop sign and totaled his car. So he was in the market for a new car. And like so many of us, the first thing he did, he got online. And he used various car selling websites to look for a new car. One of those websites was called cargurus.com. G-U-R-U-S. Now, Car Gurus is a little bit different from some other sites. What you do for Car Gurus is you enter in your email address and you enter in your search criteria. And that email address allows Car Gurus to send you emails based on your search criteria. So you want a car between 10 and 15,000, you want a red car, you want a car with a certain number of miles, you want a specific type of car. Those are only gonna be the emails that Car Guru sends you. They're not gonna spam you. They're only gonna send you what you're looking for. And they did that. They sent Justin a car that he was interested in, a 2011 Range Rover Sport, being sold out of Raleigh, North Carolina, just about an hour and a half away from where he lived in Danville, Virginia. It was a beautiful car, both inside and out. 90,000 miles on it, which wasn't a whole lot considering the year of the car. It was being listed for under Kelley Blue Book value, which seemed like a great deal. So Justin, using his Car Guru's account and using that email address, messaged the seller, Andy Banks. And the email address that Justin used to message Andy was merritt.j.0523@gmail.com. So Justin's last name, dot the first initial of his first name. His real email address, the email he uses for quite nearly everything. So the two men communicated on Car Gurus for a while. This was, I think, late August, and they went into September, about coming to look at this car. And they decided that on Tuesday, September 8th, Justin would come down to Raleigh to look at the car. And once that plan was pretty much concrete, it was happening, the two men switched to text messaging. And as you heard from Mr. Latour, Andy provided a phone number that wasn't really his. It was kind of one of those dupe phone numbers. It'll go to his phone, but it's not his true phone number, trying to remain safe. But Justin, who's the first to text message Andy, used his real phone number, the same phone number he uses to communicate with the mother of his children, his own mother, his friends and family. He used his real phone number to reach out to Andy. The two of them meet. They meet on that Tuesday, September 8th. It's the evening hours, I believe around 5 p.m. They meet in Cameron Village, the former K&W parking lot. Justin goes for a test drive with Andy. Andy in the passenger seat, Justin in the driver's seat. They're talking about the car. They're talking about the price. Justin notices some things about the car that, he didn't notice online. Mostly cosmetic stuff, nothing major. 2 tires that need replacing, a little bit of a dashboard issue, nothing great. So they settle on a price that's slightly lower than the one Andy had listed it for. And they agree Justin is going to be coming back on Saturday to buy this car. So that's the plan. They made that plan together at Cameron Village when they were together on that Tuesday for Saturday. Between Tuesday and Saturday, the two men text each other a little bit back and forth. You may see those text messages. But on Friday night, Justin realizes he's going to need someone to drive back his car to Danville. Because if he drives it down, purchases this Range Rover, how's he going to get 2 cars back up? So he enlists the help of his brother-in-law, John. He reaches out to John by phone on Friday night, says, John, can you do me a favor? Drive down with me to Raleigh to come buy this car. I found a truck, I really like it, I want to buy it. And you drive Mom's car back. So Justin was going to borrow his own mother's car, pick up John, the two of them drive down, then John drives Justin's mom's car back up to Danville, and Justin drives the Range Rover that he just bought. That was the plan. So Saturday morning, around 10 or 11 in the morning, we're talking September 12th, the Saturday, Justin leaves his mother's house in his mother's car, picks up John at John's house. John's 11-year-old daughter climbs into the back seat of the car. She wants to tag along with Daddy. She wants to go down to Raleigh for the ride. No problem. And the 3 of them go to Cameron Village. They park almost in the exact same place near the K&W parking lot, or what was the K&W. They wait. Andy pulls up in the Range Rover, parks it, gets out, gets into the passenger seat, and Justin gets into the driver's seat, and they go for the final test drive before the purchase is to happen. The evidence will show you that Justin shot Andy in that car. The evidence will show you that Justin left Andy's body in a field in Chatham, Virginia. And the evidence will show you that that car was found tarped about 300 feet away from Justin's mother's house in Danville, Virginia. We are not going to be contesting any of those things. In fact, you'll notice that throughout this case, we are largely not contesting most of what is coming in. That is not this case. This is not a whodunit. This is not the type of case where we're going to be pointing the finger at someone else and trying to convince you that someone else is responsible for this. This is not the type of case where we are going to be pointing the finger at the police and telling you that their investigation was somehow faulty, and that's the only reason we're here today. This is the case where we are simply asking you to hold the state to its burden of proof. And we discussed this so much during jury selection, and for this reason. The state has the burden of proving to you beyond a reasonable doubt every single element of every crime charged. This includes first-degree murder. We talked about premeditation and deliberation. Premeditation, thinking about this ahead of time. Deliberation, coming to the conclusion or the decision with a cool state of mind. This includes felony murder, where the state is obligated to prove the underlying felony, most likely in this case, the robbery. They have to prove to you that Justin was robbing Andy that day. So we'd simply ask that you hold them to their burden and keep an open mind. And it is going to get really tough to keep an open mind because, as we discussed, those pictures and that testimony is going to be tough. To keep an open mind and to keep thinking about premeditation and deliberation while hearing some of that testimony is not going to be easy. But we'd ask you that you keep an open mind because the evidence will also show you that Justin used his real email address to first contact Andy. The evidence will show you that Justin used his real phone number to communicate with Andy. And the evidence will show you that he brought his family down to Raleigh to come purchase that car. Because that's what this was supposed to be. This was supposed to be the purchase of a car. Because Justin, he had everything to lose and nothing to gain from coming down to Raleigh to rob a man of his car and murder him. Thank you.
Your Honor, the state would call Officer Sills with the Raleigh Police Department. Good morning still, officer.
Good morning.
Will you please introduce yourself to the jury, tell them your name, who you work for?
I'm Catherine Sills. I work for the Raleigh Police Department.
How long have you been with the Raleigh Police Department?
Approximately 5 years now.
And in those 5 years, what roles, if any, do you have and have you had with the Raleigh Police Department?
During that time, I've worked as a patrol officer for the department, so meaning I answer 911 calls, I do proactive work, I respond to anything from noise complaints to homicides.
And is that what you were doing in September of 2020?
I was.
And on or about September the 12th of 2020, were you working on duty with the Raleigh Police Department?
I was.
And during the course of your employment on that day, did you receive a missing persons complaint?
Yes, I was dispatched to one.
Okay, and what information did you have initially about the nature of that call?
Initially, it came in as a missing person report. The brother to the missing person was worried and wanted me to contact him about filing a missing person report.
Now, is that normal in your duty that you may get a missing persons report?
We get them all the time.
Did anything at that point stand out to you about this missing persons complaint?
It did not.
And did you respond to meet with anybody as a result of that missing persons call?
I contacted the brother, Mr. Mark Banks, over the phone.
And what, if anything, did you guys discuss?
He told me that he hadn't heard from his brother Andy in a couple of hours, and this was odd for him because they usually talked a lot during the day, and he was worried about him.
And when you got that information, what did you do?
I started getting more information, possible other people that he could be with. A lot of the times in these cases, it's just an adult that's capable of mind that just doesn't want to be talked to at the moment. So I just wanted to talk to everyone possible before I completed the report.
Did you do that?
I did.
Approximately how many people do you think you talked to?
I talked to the brother, Mr. Mark Banks, as well as a friend, Carter Whitley. I attempted to contact the ex-girlfriend in this case, but was unable to make contact with her over the phone.
Okay. And other than reaching out, or when you reached out to Carter Whitley and anyone else that you spoke to, did you get any other information about where Andy may be, or that this may be an actual missing person?
So Mr. Mark Banks said that Andy was supposed to be selling his car that day. He was supposed to meet the buyer in the K&W, or what used to be the K&W parking lot in the Cameron Village area. That the deal was supposed to go on around 2 p.m. and that he hadn't heard from his brother since then. Again, I tried to contact the ex-girlfriend in this case and wasn't able to make contact with her over the phone. And then I contacted Whitley, who said that he had seen him earlier in the day before he went to go sell the car.
And when you got this information, did you make any efforts to try and locate either the car or Andy?
Yes. So initially I responded to the K&W parking lot, was unable to find the Range Rover. I then drove to Andy's house off of Nur Lane, and all of the lights were out. I didn't hear anything inside. Nothing looked out of place to me.
Nur Lane, NUR?
Yes, and you are.
And did you go any other locations to try and locate Andy?
I eventually went to the ex-girlfriend's apartment because I was informed that his other car, he was going to be driving away from the deal, would be parked in that parking lot.
What kind of car was that, if you remember?
If I may refresh my memory really quick. It was a BMW.
And were you ever, did you ever go to the ex-girlfriend's residence?
I did go to her actual residence.
And while you were there, did you make any observations?
There was a package sitting outside of the door. I'd been informed by the brother and the friend that the ex-girlfriend was currently in Florida. So this aligned with that. There was no sign of tampering or damage to the ex-girlfriend's door or residence in any way.
Did you ever locate any automobile or car that belonged to Andy?
I located the BMW in that parking lot of the apartment complex.
Would that be the ex-girlfriend's apartment complex?
It would be.
If you can remember, can you kind of orient us as far as a distance? Is it close by Cameron Village or the Village District, that apartment complex where you located the BMW?
It's within walking distance.
Okay. You may have said that, and I might have missed it, but through your investigation, you had testified earlier that you didn't have a lot of red flags about this being anything that you were that concerned about. Did that opinion about whether or not Andy was missing ever change for you?
It did. Upon looking into Andy, I realized that this wasn't typical behavior of someone who, it didn't appear that he had anything to run away from. All of his friends and family said that he was very close to them, that they had constant contact with him.
And so when it started to change in your mind that this may in fact be something more than just him gone off to clear his mind, what'd you do?
I asked Mr. Mark and Mr. Whitley to meet me at Andy's residence.
That's the victim's brother?
Yes.
Okay. So Mark and Carter met you at that Nur Lane address?
They did.
Okay. And is that townhouses?
Yes, it is.
When you got to the townhouse, what happened?
They had the code to the door. It was one of those automated locks, so they were able to get inside the residence. And we did a quick security sweep to make sure there was nothing that needed to be addressed initially. And then we had the brother and the friend do a walkthrough of the actual townhouse.
Did anything happen based on what you found or didn't see in the townhouse?
They said that there was nothing out of place. It didn't appear that there was any struggle. There was no mess anywhere in the house. They said it was exactly how they usually see his house.
So having this information, what, if anything, did you do next?
At this point, my sergeant was able to we call it ping the phone. Essentially, they triangulate the phone between cell towers and provide an approximate coordinate for the possible phone location.
Okay, so I'm gonna take that a little bit piece by piece.
Okay.
Did you and your sergeant request anyone, the phone company, to do this ping?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And when you say a ping, is that something that the phone company does to try and maybe get an approximate location?
Yes, it is.
And do you guys, as law enforcement, have access to that information if it yields any results?
Yes, they provide it to us.
Okay. And in this case, you said you got the phone company to do that.
Yes.
Was that for Andy's phone?
It was for Andy's phone.
All right. And so you get an approximate location for Andy's phone, and where might that have been in this situation?
It was showing in Cary, basically on the SAS campus.
Having that information, what, if anything, did you do?
We contacted the Cary Police Department and let them know that we were going to be searching for Andy in their jurisdiction. And I responded to the SAS campus to try and locate Andy.
Were other officers involved in this?
Yes, there were.
So at this point, you're hoping that you may find Andy there and the phone?
At this point, we're looking for the phone, but we are also hoping that the phone is with Andy.
Okay. And when you're on the SAS campus in Cary, do you find anything?
We don't find anything.
Having not found anything at SAS, what'd you do next?
My sergeant requested for another ping.
Of that same phone?
Yes.
And was there a second ping of Andy's phone?
Yes, there was.
And what, if any, information did you receive as a result of the second ping?
This time it was showing the coordinates to be in Olmsted Park, but on the Cary side.
So in Olmsted Park?
Yes.
And getting this information about the second ping, what, if anything, did you do?
Myself and several other officers responded to the park to try and locate the phone and Andy.
Now, is all of this still happening on September the 12th?
September the 12th and to the morning hours of the 13th.
All right. And so, while you're looking around in Cary for this phone, you're at Olmsted. Did you find anything in Olmsted?
We found nothing in Olmsted.
What, if anything, did you do after searching Olmsted?
I was informed that Mr. Nichols had actually contacted my sergeant and said that he located the phone on the side of the highway.
Was it Carter that had located
Yes.
the phone? Okay.
Sorry, Whitley.
Sorry?
Mr. Whitley.
Whitley, okay. So Carter, you get information that Carter may have found the phone.
Yes.
So what do you do once you get that information?
We respond to the spot where he located it.
And did you respond?
I did respond.
When you got there, can you describe that area for us generally?
So it's I-40 westbound, right before the Harrison exit. Carter was on the side of the road, pulled over, and so I pulled over to the breakdown lane, and the phone was located in the grass of the breakdown lane.
Did you see the phone?
I did.
All right. Were there other law enforcement officers there?
There were.
Did any of you, to your knowledge, touch or try to manipulate the phone in any way?
No, we did not,
Why not?
because at this point we deemed it evidence.
Okay. And were you concerned that if you touched it, you might tamper with some evidence?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Having found Andy's phone on the side of I-40, what'd you do?
I requested for CCBI, which is the City County Bureau of Investigations, to respond and collect the evidence and take photographs of it.
Are they kind of like the CSI on television?
Akin to that, yes.
They do your crime scene processing?
Yes, they do.
All right. And sometimes collect evidence?
Yes.
So you wanted them to come and look at the phone.
Yes, I did.
And why did you want CCBI to come and look at the phone?
At this point, I've determined it's probably, in my opinion, farther than a missing person investigation. And I wanted to make sure that we did it correctly and by what our DOI says to do.
Okay. And while you're there watching the phone and while CCBI comes and collects the phone, are you there when they collect it?
I am.
And do you have any other interaction at that point with this case?
No, I do not.
Okay. At any point after that, did you get involved in this case?
I did not.
So that was the end of your role.
It was the end of my role.
Thank you. Are you aware if Andy was placed into any sort of database as a missing person?
Yes, so I also placed him into the national database as a missing person.
What is that generally for us?
So that way, if any law enforcement anywhere in the country runs his name, they're able to see that he's listed as a missing person out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
No further questions, Your Honor.
No questions.
She is, and yes, Your Honor.
No, John.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would call James Hamlin.
So place that on the Bible, left hand, raise your right, face the Lord.
Solemnly swear that the testimony you give before the jury will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you, Ms.
James, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
James Hamblin, I'm a good friend of Andy Banks.
And how do you spell your last name?
Hamblin.
And James, generally, where do you live?
I live in Cameron Village with my cousin, Carter Whitley.
All right. Who we've already heard testimony from, about.
Correct.
About, okay. And when you say Cameron Village, that's here in Raleigh?
Correct.
Right? Kind of close by downtown.
Yes.
Do you live in the shopping center district or in the surrounding area?
Surrounding area, it's about an eighth of a mile away from the parking lot in question.
And you said that you were a good friend of Andy. How did you know Andy?
I met Andy through Carter, my cousin. They're a fair bit older than me, so they went to North Carolina State University together. When I moved to Raleigh in 2016, Andy just became a really good friend of mine and introduced me to most of the friends I have today.
And so, pretty consistently in your friend group?
Yes, and especially, as you mentioned, with COVID, we were around each other a lot since it was a lockdown situation.
They're kind of in your immediate circle there.
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if Andy used to sell cars?
Yes, he did.
Was this a one-off thing, or is this something that he would do kind of consistently?
No, he would do this very consistently. It was sort of a hobby of his. He liked meeting people and he was entrepreneurial, I guess I would say.
Can you kind of generally describe the type of person that Andy was?
Andy was
Objection, Your
always...
Honor.
Let the record reflect yourself.
Your Honor, we're just getting a little bit into victim impact, and it's just not relevant at this point. We let some come in about NC State and introducing him to all his friends he knows now, but asking this witness and having him describe who Andy was as a person, bears no relevance to this case, and we just object to that. I believe we filed a motion pre-trial about limiting victim impact during the guilt phase of this trial.
It's not victim impact to talk about the victim. It's just describing the victim. The victim impact would be, how has this loss affected you, Mr. Witness or Madam Witness? What we're talking about is laying the foundation for the type of person that he was, in that how he would have reacted in the situation for which he found himself faced later on down the road, whether he was the type of person that was a friendly or an aggressive person that may try to combat or argue with someone who is attempting to rob him, which may lead into premeditation, deliberation, and those other issues. Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. I believe my question, James, was, can you generally tell us what type of person Andy was?
Andy was very friendly, outgoing, extroverted, always just a trusting person that everyone got along with.
Was he an aggressive kind of guy?
Not at all.
And you said you had known him for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Had you seen him in a lot of different circumstances?
Lots of different circumstances, yeah.
And we heard a little bit of testimony from Officer Sills about Andy's telephone.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what, if any, relationship Andy had with his cell phone?
Andy was someone who was always staring at his phone, sometimes at an obnoxious amount. You'd be trying to have a conversation with him and have to ask him a question twice because his face was in his phone. So he was always looking at it.
So would it have been odd for, in your opinion, knowing Andy, for him to not have his cell phone on him?
Yes, it was very odd, yeah.
And you said that Andy had, as one of his jobs or things that he liked to do was to flip cars.
Yes.
Do you know the process by which he usually flipped cars?
I do not know fully. I wasn't often engaged in those types of deals that he did. I do know that he used Craigslist from time to time, car gurus from time to time. Sometimes he would sell cars back to dealerships, but I do know that he used that Google Voice to communicate with people quite often.
Do you know what Google Voice is generally?
I have a general idea, but I'm certainly not a tech person.
Well, generally, what is your idea of what Google Voice was?
It's a way that he can communicate with someone without using his phone number.
And he would use that during these car deals?
All the time.
Do you know why he would do that?
Just for security reasons, just to be safe.
Are you aware of any car deals that Andy was involved with about that a Range Rover?
Yes.
Okay. And was that a Range Rover that he had in September of 2020?
Yes.
The silver Range Rover?
Yes.
And on the front end of that deal, what, if anything, were you aware of?
On the front end of that deal, I knew that he had met someone on Tuesday. I did not know their name at the time, but Andy had told us all about it. He would, kind of tell you things in mundane detail that you didn't think you needed to know, but he said it went well, that this person seemed like a nice enough guy, that on the weekend he was going to bring his mechanic back to take another look before he decided whether or not he wanted to purchase the car.
And did y'all talk at that point, before Saturday, anything else about that deal that you remember today?
We consistently talked about it on and off throughout the rest of the week. Again, Andy, this is something that he liked to do, and it was a hobby, so he would talk about it at length. That morning, on Saturday morning, Andy and I went to have breakfast at the farmer's market restaurant, and he was telling me about it then, but there were no red flags. It all sounded fairly normal. I mean, Andy had met with mechanics in the past, so it all seemed normal, and we didn't have any red flags going into the meeting.
So you said on that Saturday, would that have been September the 12th of 2020?
Correct.
So the day that Andy goes missing,
Correct.
You and Andy go to breakfast at the farmer's market.
Yes.
During that breakfast, you have some discussion about the sale of the Range Rover.
Correct.
After you guys had breakfast, what'd you do?
We went back to Carter's house, which is my place of residence as well. And the plan was just to, again, this was COVID, so everything was shut down. We were just planning on hanging out at the house and watching college football most of the day.
And was Carter at the house?
Carter was at the house.
Was Carter at breakfast with you guys?
Carter was not. We had the three of us went to dinner the night before. Carter woke up feeling a bit sick. Again, COVID lockdown times. Carter didn't feel like it was smart to come to breakfast with us.
So you guys go to breakfast, you then come back to your house, or watching some football.
Yes.
Around how long are you guys at your place watching football?
Probably an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, all three of us together.
Okay. And at some point, you say, all three of you together, did somebody leave?
Yes, Andy left the house, which, again, we knew was happening.
Okay. Do you remember around what time that would have been?
Some games had already started, so it would have been afternoon. I don't remember the exact time, though.
Okay. And did he say anything when he was leaving?
Yes, he told us he was going to, he had his BMW, that had just been mentioned, and it was at our house. He drove it to Taylor, his ex-girlfriend's apartment, because that's where he kept some cars, because he could keep them there without being charged for parking. And so he dropped that car off. He picked up the Range Rover and then drove to the K&W parking lot, is my understanding. That's what he told us he was going to do.
Okay. And did he say anything else about the deal at that point?
Not specifically about the deal. Again, I didn't know any personal information about the person he was meeting up with. But he did tell Carter and myself that he would be back in no more than 30 minutes.
And can you kind of, if you remember, describe what Andy looked like when he left the residence there?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a Saturday, so he was wearing a T-shirt, pants, raincoat. I don't remember exactly what the T-shirt looked like, but just pretty casual type of clothing that Andy would typically wear.
Anything out of the ordinary in the way he was acting or behaving?
Absolutely not, no.
So when Andy left to go do this car deal, you stayed behind?
Correct. Carter and I both stayed at the house.
And what'd you do while Andy was gone?
We just watched football. We just sat there and watched football. Yeah.
At some point, let me ask you this, did you ever hear from Andy again after he left?
I never heard from Andy after he left the house, no.
And at some point, did that cause you any concern?
Carter and I both started to get concerned when maybe 2 hours had passed. And we used WhatsApp to communicate with Andy, and there's blue check marks which tell you if someone has read the message or not. And again, Andy always had his phone. Sorry.
Well, let me ask you this. You said WhatsApp. Describe for us what WhatsApp is.
Sorry, WhatsApp is just an app that you can have on your phone. It's like text messaging, but in an app, essentially.
And you say there's check marks so you can tell whether or not somebody has opened or read your messages.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And so did you attempt to message him on this program?
We attempted to message him on that program. We attempted to call him on it. None of those blue check marks ever came up that would tell us that he read a message. And again, this was after a couple hours had gone by, and that's when Carter and I started to get concerned.
And when you started to get concerned based on these no answers, what'd you do?
After about 3 hours, I would say, we thought something might be up. And again, we knew where Andy said he was going. So we got in the car, Carter and I did. We drove to Taylor, his ex-girlfriend's apartment, and saw the BMW was parked where he said it was going to be parked. We looked around the car. It was locked, but there was nothing that looked odd or off about it. We then drove to the K&W parking lot. He did tell us that this person was coming from Virginia, so we were honestly looking for license plates that said Virginia, which we didn't really find any. But yeah, we started going out and looking for him at the places where we thought he might have gone.
And other than finding the BMW at Taylor's place, did you locate anything that was of use?
No, nothing of use, no.
At this point, what do you do?
At that point, we decided to contact Mark, Andy's brother, just because we thought something was seriously wrong at this point. And so that's when we got in touch with Mark, and Mark put in the missing persons report after he gave a good shot at trying to get in touch with Andy, and Andy never got back in touch with him either.
And once this happened and you're still no word from Andy, what happened next?
From there, again, we went to the house with police officers. We waited until they got there to do anything, but Carter and I just kept looking for Andy just in typical places that he might go, just driving around kind of aimlessly, honestly. We didn't really have much to go on, but we were just looking for him because this seemed out of character.
Did you ever find him?
No.
What'd you do next?
That night after we had gone to Andy's house, I went back home and went to bed. And this was probably midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning that I went to bed. And then the next day, Andy's father came, and we started searching for Andy with Mark, with his father, Bill, and Carter.
So, I'm not a mathematician, but you said at around after the noon game started, he leaves. Supposed to have a meeting early afternoon, let's say 2 o'clock. Said about 2 hours go by, so that's what, 4 o'clock or so. So from 4 o'clock until 1 o'clock in the morning on the 12th into the 13th, are you consistently searching for Andy?
Very consistently, getting in touch with friends, searching, have you seen Andy? Yeah, all that was going on.
So then you go to bed, and the next day you get back up, and do you continue that search?
Yes, absolutely.
And what types of things are you doing the next day?
The first thing that we thought to do was see if there were any security cameras in the Village District, Cameron Village. Chick-fil-A is right across the street. Crunch Gym is right there. So we got in touch with, I believe it's York Security that does security there. They told us they couldn't pull any security footage without a police warrant. And I started knocking on. I went into Chick-fil-A. They didn't have any cameras that reached that parking lot. Same with Crunch Gym. But essentially, we were trying to get an idea of what happened in that parking lot. But just, again, searching the area, staying in touch with friends, driving around, trying to find them.
What else, if anything, did you do that day that you remember?
Nothing in particular that I would think would be worth note. Again, just looking for Andy. Yeah.
So this is on Sunday the 13th, right? What if at some point do you go to the Raleigh Police Department?
Well, we already had
You'd
the
already-
day before. The day before, so they were in touch with us at this point. We had already filed the missing persons report. Yes, that was Saturday.
Did you ever go back and have another meeting with the Raleigh Police
I
Department?
did Monday morning with Detective Jackson.
Okay, so that would have been the 14th.
Correct. And so we got a call to come in early in the morning, maybe 7:30 a.m., something like that. And that's when they told us that they were treating this as a homicide.
And during this period of time, from Sunday to Monday and until ultimately Andy is found, what are you doing?
we're just in the car searching for him. Honestly, again, very aimlessly. A lot of Andy's friends and our friends that live outside of Raleigh had come to town, and we were basically just dividing and conquering, and just, you know, we knew where his phone had been left on the side of the highway, so we started going to Umstead and just areas around Cary, and just honestly just looking at that point. And we did that until we officially got word on, yeah,
Around the 17th or
yes,
so.
Thursday, I believe it was.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
No questions.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you may step down and give her this one. Started at 9 this morning, started at 4:45, going 30 minutes more than we had. So we're gonna take our morning recess, we're gonna recess until 11:10. Remember, please remember my prior invitations, do not talk with anybody about the case or let anyone attempt to talk to you about the case, talk about the case in your presence. If someone should attempt to do so, notify one of the bailiffs about that fact immediately. Do not form an opinion about the case. Please do not do any sort of research concerning the case. That being said, everyone remain seated while the jurors leave the courtroom. Make sure you leave your notebooks on your table.